what is your qualification and all these things. This is not this kind of interview. This is a discussion. This will be a scientific discussion with a committee. On the basis of the article, they will send you a month beforehand, before the interview. Okay, so this is easier. This makes things easier because you know exactly what expects you during the interview. You have the article, you read the article, you understand the article, you know what the article speaks about, and you will discuss about the article and the aspects and the analysis contained in the article with the committee. That's all. This makes things much easier, right? Now, you know, during the whole year, the preparation, so-called preparation year of the master studies in Düsseldorf, what we are doing actually is to prepare you or to introduce you, actually, let's say, the German way of working, more or less, okay? As much as possible, of course, under these specific conditions in Palestine. This means that, of course, you have to be successful in all courses in order to be nominated to participate in the interview. So what you actually do during the preparation year is to work according some criteria and standards that this program sets to students that want to go finally to Germany. So you learn to be always on time in the class, which is not always self-understandable. And this is in this class, I mean, everything is fine. I mean, you do under these very, very sometimes difficult conditions to be on time in the class, to attend regularly, and so on and so forth. Even now, online, everybody is here, everybody is attending, except there are some specific problems, technical problems, but anyway. So you learn, you know, to be responsible in general, to be responsible. I mean, you don't learn this now. I know that you have experience. I mean, you are not, a freshman. Nobody of you is a freshman in studies, so you know how this works. I mean, you have been responsible during your bachelor studies, and you know that you have to be responsible also by participating in this program. But especially the working methods, the working style, the working attitude is tried to be transferred to the students during the preparation year, and everybody complies actually to the standards. This is my impression, my opinion. Everybody complies. Everybody tries to do his best in this program. So during this preparation year, everything will be completed successfully, I guess, by all students. Of course, I mean, the grades, you know, the final grades in all courses will be different from student to student, and this reflects to a great extent the real abilities, the real skills of all students. Not all students are, of course, regarding this aspect, students are different, okay? But the point is that all of you, I think, will be successful in all courses of this program until the end of May. Now, this is completed, this is successful, okay? You have been successful in all courses, but this is only the one part. It's the biggest part of the program, of the preparation, is the biggest part, but it's not the final stage. The final stage will be the interview. And in my eyes, you know, because I have a lot of experience regarding interviews in both terms, to be interviewed and to interview others. Okay, I have did that in my life many times. By the way, in the end of March, if I succeed now to go back to Germany, I have to go to the DAAD for an interview for a new position abroad. So I will be interviewed. I will be interviewed just like you in July, okay? This is something common in academia. I mean, every time you apply for something, scholarship, position, professorship, whatever, you have to be interviewed, right? Okay, types of interview are different, but you have to be interviewed. And on the top of that, I mean, I have also interviewed people. like you, students that apply for scholarships. I was doing this for 6.5 years in the frame of this program. So, in my opinion, the final stage, which is the interview, is also the most decisive one if it is about really selecting the people that will get scholarships, or people that will get, or one person that will get the position, okay, out of many candidates. So in my eyes, the interview is the most decisive moment of the whole year, the most decisive stage of the whole year, just because, I mean, in general terms, I would say that the interview is a kind of oral exercise, oral exam, okay? Why I say this? Because, this program is an English-speaking program, right? So you must be good in both written and spoken English. I know that this is connected. I mean, especially spoken English, is connected to experience you must have and to exercise before that. But nevertheless, it's a kind of okay. Hi, Marwa. Nice that you could finally join the class. I'm just speaking about the interview. I just already started to provide you information about the interview. So this is the final exercise, exam, so to say, oral exam, the interview, because, first thing that the committee does during the interview is to understand your skills in English. I mean, very simply, because it's an English-speaking program, both the preparation year and especially the master studies in Düsseldorf, so they try to understand to which extent your oral skills are sufficient. And then the second thing is, of course, during the interview, during the discussion, they try to understand, by each candidate, they try to understand your skills and your quality, your performance, your abilities in terms of being able to participate in a scientific discussion and being able to articulate yourselves as comprehensive and properly as possible in arguing in a scientific way. These two things, the one is technical, oral skills, okay, and the other one is more scientific, goes deeper in terms of being in the position to scientifically, comprehensively participate in a scientific discussion, okay? And you have to convince the committee about both. This is the interview. So you have time, approximately 1 month time, to prepare yourselves in terms of these two aspects of the interview as properly as possible. So this is what I have to say about the interview. Again, you have to, don't be afraid with the interviewer, about the interview. Don't worry. Because if you worry, then you cannot, of course, sometimes, people are blocked, although they have the abilities and they are in the position to perform good, they are blocked because of psychological reasons sometimes, I know that. Try to be relaxed, but not too much, not too relaxed, okay? And I think that you will be able to convince the committee about your qualifications in terms of being able to successfully complete studies in Germany. Okay, of course, not everybody can finally be selected, because the rule is that the committee can select up to 10 students. Okay, so there is a kind of competition among you. This is unavoidable. But again, as I told you during the last semester, nevertheless, the chance you have to be selected is amazingly high. This is not given in academia. You have a chance of more than, if I'm right, by 18 students, then selected, more than 50%. This is an amazingly high percentage. As I told you, normally the percentage to be selected lies at if you apply for a scholarship or money for research, approximately at 5 to 7, 8 if you are lucky percent. So 50, over 50%, you have a chance of 60 actually percent approximately to be selected, if I'm right. So this is an amazingly high percentage and an amazingly high chance to continue master studies in Germany. So what you have to do is just to do your best, okay, to prepare yourself properly, to do your best, and to hope that you will be selected finally, because again, not everybody can be selected. There is, I mean, this is normal. There's competition, okay? There's always competition in life. Well, I think that's all I had to say about the interviews, and now at least you know how this works, what expects you. I couldn't understand the question right now. Can you please open your microphone and ask this question, because I couldn't understand.
Hello. Yesterday I texted you and I just asked about the controversial issue about the ECB decision-making process. Why do they think it's a controversial issue? Is it because they do not take decisions with a majority voting?
Ah, yes, okay, I remember, yes. Okay. I hope that everybody can hear the question, right? If someone speaks. Could you hear what Razan was asking? Oh, okay, good. Okay. Okay, well, now this of course regards now the contents of the course. This is why now we will start the course. Okay, I think this was all I had to say about the interview or the interviews. Ah, by the way, one more thing, a technical thing, in detail. Not this won't be an individual interview, by the way. Okay, this makes things again easier. They will, depends on the overall number of students. They will interview 2, 3, 4 students together. Okay, because this is a discussion again. It's not an individual interview. It's a discussion with the students on a scientific issue. So this makes things easier because you will be in the room, in the interview room, together with 2, 3 more students. Okay. Well, now let's start now the course. Let's start the course. First of all, I will provide an answer to the question by Razan, and then we will continue with the new PowerPoint presentation. Well, this is an issue actually more or less already discussed. And by the way, discussed already in the last semester in the frame of the EU law course, namely the problematic of consensus of consensus requirements in terms of in the process of the decision making process. And this is a very controversial issue in the meanwhile within the European Union, in the European Union institutions, because this unavoidably blocks sometimes the decision-making process, or makes it more slow than allowed sometimes in order to find proper solutions in a short time. Consensus sometimes blocks decision-making. Everybody's aware about this in the EU institutions, and this applies not only to the ECB, the European Central Bank. This applies to the decision-making process in the EU in general. So this is a general problem that applies not only to the ECB, and there are in the meanwhile concrete proposals to, rather with an amendment to the treaty, to abolish the consensus rule by replacing it with the majority rule. Of course, this, as you can understand, this is opposed by some countries that are afraid that they will, they will be weaker in this process, and they want to protect their rights, because consensus, if you have a veto, if you have the right for veto, so a small country like Malta or Luxembourg, for example, can block decisions of the whole EU. So some countries, especially small countries, are very afraid of this, of abolishing the consensus rule. There is some opposition still, but it is obvious to everybody that this has to be changed, because especially in times of crisis, and when not only of crisis, I mean, if there's a need of a quick solution, that this is not a good rule to come up with quick decisions and actions sometimes. Okay, well, now I hope this was a satisfying answer. Now please open the second presentation. Okay, Razan, thank you very much. Now please open the second presentation, which is the presentation on EU governance, economic governance, EU budget, the euro, etc. This is the second main presentation of the course. Okay, I hope that everybody could open this. You see the first slide. Okay, you see the first slide. Economic governance of the EU budget, the euro crisis, and new structures. Now, slide number 2. There is a general overview. Who is doing what within the economic governance of the Economic and Monetary Union? This, of course, applies, as you understand, to the Eurozone, okay? Not to the EU as a whole. Actually to the Eurozone, but also, to some extent, also to the EU as a whole. It is about, for example, the EU budget. But this is an overview more concentrated on the Eurozone. So I will just now read. Within the Monetary Union, there is no single institution responsible for economic policy. Instead, the responsibility is shared. It's shared, as it is the case most of the times within the EU. It's about decision making. The main actors are as follows. The European Parliament. Now, of course, you know all of that, but now this is more focused on economic activities, so to say, okay? The European Parliament shares the job of formulating legislation with the Council. You know that already. This is the ordinary legislation process, right? And subjects economic governance to democratic scrutiny, in particular through the new economic dialogue. The European Council sets the main policy orientations. This is the European Council. These are the leaders of the EU, okay? Not the Council of the EU, the Council of Ministers that that coordinates EU economic policy making and takes decisions which can bind individual EU countries. You know that. This is the institution that launches legislation finally. The European Commission proposes orientations for the conduct of economic and fiscal policy to the Council, monitors performance and ensures compliance with Council decisions. So again, also in this field, the European Commission proposes and monitors. You have learned about this a lot in the last course on EU law. The European Central Bank, this is a new institution now, already discussed, of course, in the last presentation, during the last days, sets monetary policy for the euro area with price stability as the prime objective. Price stability. By the way, again, not the ECB does not ensure employment. They're already discussed, for example. Okay, this makes a big difference to the US, for example. The Eurogroup, this is a new now institution, already discussed yesterday. These are the finance ministers of the euro area countries, coordinates policies of common interest for the euro area, and the EU countries finally set their national budgets within agreed limits for deficit and debt, and determine their own structural policies involving labor, pensions, and capital markets. This is a national issue, the three last things. It's not an EU issue. Now, please, slide number 3 is only titled the EU budget. Now, you will learn more about how the budget of the EU is set, appointed. Okay? And the budget is appointed. Go please to now slide number 4. EU budget, features and tasks. You will learn a bit more now about the budget. The EU budget is strictly constrained by its availability of resources, equilibrium principle. No way, this specifically means, already discussed actually, no way for deficit spending and borrowing. There's no EU public debt. There's no shared debt yet in the European Union. For example, there was a big discussion during the crisis to launch Eurobonds, so-called Eurobonds, meaning not bonds, state bonds by each national state, but Eurobonds in order to finance countries in debt problems. But these Eurobonds, if there is the case that they will be launched sometime, this is not the case yet. These Eurobonds would mean that all countries together, they have a shared responsibility. And there are many countries like Germany, the Netherlands, northern countries that don't want this. By no means, they don't want this to share responsibility with the countries in the south, especially in the south, that are in a high debt. Well, just a general information. I think it comes in another slide. Is on another slide, but anyway. The budget will be appointed for 7 years. Now the EU is just about to appoint the next budget to start in January 2021 until 2027. And it was just 2 weeks ago, I think, or 3 weeks ago, that the first negotiations about setting the new budget failed in Brussels. But this is normal. This is totally normal. This is, by the way, the process of appointing the budget starts approximately 4 years before the new budget should start. So negotiations to appoint the budget for the next 7 years, 21-27, started actually 4 years back, earlier. It started in approximately 2017. Okay, 16-17. It takes a long time to come to a consensus, because this is based on consensus, by the way. This makes things much more difficult, as you can understand, that everybody agrees to money to be spent in different policy areas. This is what it is about. This takes time. This takes approximately 4 years to come to an agreement by everybody, to a consensus. And it happens all the times that this consensus is a last-minute consensus. If I'm right, the last budget that ends in the end of this year was appointed, I think, 1 or 2 days before the deadline. Are these determinants for EU member states used to show? What do you mean exactly? I don't understand what you mean. This is a budget. Proposed by the Commission, discussed by the states, and appointed by the ministers. This is the same procedure. By the ministers and the European Parliament, by the way. By the way, in this process, if the European Parliament does not agree, there's no way to appoint the budget. Are new powers of the Parliament now in the Treaty of Lisbon. The Parliament must agree with the budget, with the distribution of money, with the allocation of spending. Okay, if this is what you mean, what you asked. Again, it is appointed by consensus. This is very, very important. So what determines the institutions' budgets? The institutions' budgets. Let me please go ahead with the next slides, and I think your question will be answered. Because there is a distribution to policy areas, the distribution of single because there's an annual budget and an overall budget, and the annual budget must be agreed upon every year by everybody. Okay, I think you will get the answer by the next slides. Now, there is a lot of discussion about how big this budget is. It's about 1 trillion in the meanwhile, just about 1 trillion euros for 7 years. As you well know, one of the reasons that the United Kingdom left the EU was the argument that we have to transfer a lot of money to the EU, to the budget. We have to contribute to the budget, to the common expenditures. Well, if you see the numbers, this is not an updated number. The number is an old number, but not much changed a lot in the meanwhile. The overall budget of the EU for 7 years makes approximately 1.2% of the EU gross national income of all countries together. 1.2%. Okay, and makes 2% of the public expenditure in EU countries. This is now a bit higher, 2.3, 2 point something. So it is very small in size. It's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money taken together. I mean, taking the EU gross national income together, this makes only 1.2%, and has limited tasks. Is an instrument for funding only circumscribed common actions. Only what is written can be supported by money, right? And has a restricted room for redistributive policies. There's not a lot of room to redistribute money, and not suitable for stabilization macro policies. And this applies, for example, the last one applies, for example, what happened during the crisis. The money cannot be spent, for example, for stabilization macro policies in terms, for example, of countries that face debt problems. This money cannot be used for that. Well, please go to slide number 5 now. We go into more details now about the structure of the EU budget, and first of all about the revenues, meaning where does the money come from? Well, you can see on the slide. We will not now spend a lot of time regarding, regarding all of this. It's very technical. I mean, there are traditional own resources. And by the way, you will see later on also some diagrams, and this will be clearer in the end by looking at the diagrams that just follow. So don't worry, you will understand everything. We have traditional own resources, money that the EU regularly receives. And this consists, you can see the explanation, short explanations by every kind of revenue on that slide. Value added tax and other revenues, for example, you remember, but this is not a big amount, it's about 1%. For example, punishment of states and companies, for example, if they violate competition, remember, very high penalties to be paid. So all of that makes these are other revenues, 1%. But the main thing is traditional own resources, and of course, as an example, I have added 2010. The annual revenue of the EU was approximately 1 to 2 billion euros. So we have to now, please go to slide number 6. And this is not, it is an older one, it's an older diagram, but you can see here the structure of the EU budget regarding revenues, okay? Regarding revenues, from where the money comes, There are more diagrams. Don't worry. There are more diagrams in this presentation in order to better understand. But again, it is important to understand that the revenues, everything, I mean, revenues and expenditures now just follow. Everything is appointed. Everything is appointed. You cannot spend the money as you like, okay, for 7 years. And this is appointed on an annual basis, but also as an overall amount, both, okay? This is very, very strictly regulated because, as you well know, and this goes, and this applies to all aspects of life, where money begins. This is, by the way, a German saying: "Where money begins, friendship ends." Right? So, money to be, sources of money and how money should be spent, everything is defined it is very detailed defined. Okay, this is what you have to know. Now, please go to slide number 7, which is about expenditures. And you know, where the money comes is the one thing, but for what money is spent, this is more important as you understand. Okay, it's more, it's good to know, and this is very strictly defined and appointed. Regarding expenditures, we have two main categories. The one is compulsory spending. It makes about 40%, and you can see for what actually 3 points on the slide for what this money is spent. Commitments in the treaties and related legislation is automatic. And again, most of the money still today, a big part of the money still today is dedicated to CAP. What is CAP? What is CAP? Does somebody know? You don't know what CAP is, right? This is the common agricultural policy. So still today, and this is strange perhaps in your ears, still today most of the money is spent in agriculture in the EU, in subsidies, in agricultural subsidies or for agricultural subsidies. This is what most of the money is spent, okay? It used to be much higher in the past. You will see the diagrams after all. But still today, subsidies in agriculture makes a big part of the EU overall budget, and annual and overall budget. And we have also non-compulsory spending, expenditures. This makes about 60% of the overall budget. And let's go now. Okay, this is an overview, very general overview of spending. And let's go now to slide number 8. Every 7 years, yes, because it used to be less. It used to be in the 80s, 70s, 80s, it was appointed for only 5 years. And after the Maastricht Treaty, the rule now is to appoint for 7 years because this provides the EU at least with a bit more stability in terms of budget. More stability, not 5 years only, but 7 years. And the other problem is, of course, as I told you, that if you have much more countries, in the 80s you had only 12 countries. Okay, in the 90s you had 15. After 2000 you had 24. Now you have 27. And to appoint the budget, it takes more time. You have more people to decide about, and this takes more time. So 5 years is a very short time to run a budget and to decide about the next. As I told you, it lasts now for 4 years until the new budget is appointed. So this is why 7 years, to have more stability and to more time to set the next one. Now, you can see now on this slide, slide number 8, you can see more about expenditures. As you understand here, I provide you with more information about the expenditures, because from where money comes is clear, is set. Okay, you don't have so many resources for money for income to the budget. Who pays the budget? Okay, you will see the slides anyway after all, but most important are the expenditures, and because it is connected to a lot of discussion among states, within states, during the crisis, after the crisis, and so on and so forth. This is connected to much more complication. No, nothing is arbitrary here. Everything is appointed. You see, agriculture, still today. Yes, it is more democratic, just because, as I told you, the European Parliament now has to agree. Without an agreement of the Parliament, there's no budget. There's no budget agreement. It's a new now regulation since 2009. Now, you can see now for what money is spent, exactly, on slide 8. Natural resources, agriculture, it still makes 43, almost half. Almost half of the budget of the EU is spent in agriculture. You will see later on which country, by the way, receives more of the money, most of the money in agricultural subsidies. You will see, you will be surprised. This is not Greece, this is not Spain, and so on and so forth, but another country, big country of the EU. It makes still today 43%. Cohesion, France, yes, exactly, France. This is the country that receives most of the money coming from this part of the budget. France. Cohesion for growth, these are actually, in Germany too, yes. Structural, the so-called structural funds, used to be less, now it's more, it's much more actually, 36% of the budget, and this is good just because this is money to be spent in all member states in order to support structural developments. Okay, and this is good that this part of the budget is increased during the last now 7 years, especially after the Treaty of Lisbon. They decided to increase it to 36%. Different kinds of projects are financed with that money. For example, if you travel across Greece, for example, on the highways, you will see big signs on the side of the highway informing you that this highway, for example, or this part of the highway was built and was constructed with the help of the European Union within the budget period of within the specific budget period. And the rule is by structural funds, by different kinds of projects to be realized in all member states. The rule is the EU pays 75% of the overall budget for specific projects, and the national state pays 25%. This is the rule. So most of the highways in Greece, for example, but not only Greece. I mean, Eastern Germany was constructed to a great extent with these structural funds coming from the EU. Okay, so the German state received a lot of money to reconstruct Eastern Germany, for example. But this is connected again. This is not money. No, this is this is a big. Thank you very much for the question. This is an interesting question. No, please remind me to discuss this a bit later on. Okay, this is an interesting thing. It has to do with many problems within the NATO, by the way. This question about military spending in the EU. Let me first close the slide, and then I will tell you more, a bit more. Well, 9% for competitiveness, growth, internal actions, research, innovation, for example, education. For a global action of the EU, 6%. All the money that comes, for example, to Palestine, to support different projects in Palestine, comes from this part of the budget, of the EU budget. External actions, 6%. And administration, 6%. Again, this was again an argument against the EU in the Brexit process. It was an argument that a lot of money spent, and this is still a criticism in all countries all over the EU, that a lot of money spent for administration and bureaucracy in the EU. Please, this makes 6%. All these guys working in Brussels, they get 6% of the overall EU budget. If the if the overall budget makes 1.2% of the gross income of the whole EU, and only 6% is spent for administration, this is peanuts, right? This is just peanuts. Okay, and you know, there's a lot of discussion about nothing in the EU sometimes. They only want to create the impression by citizens that a lot of money is spent for nothing. But this is really not worth it to be discussed even. These are peanuts in reality. Okay. Well, now regarding military spending, this is a big issue, especially after. Well, fraud is a problem. Fraud is a problem. Okay, this is also an important question. Connects to what was discussed in the last course about corruption. Okay, remind me about this. I will tell you also about this. But first, about military spending, especially after President Trump came into power, he criticized a lot that Europeans are actually, I mean, or to say it better, European defense in general, European defense is based on the NATO, on the NATO structure, and Europeans don't spend a lot for their own defense. And there was indeed, I think there was an agreement during the Obama administration that every member state of the NATO, especially European countries, member states in Europe of the NATO, they have to spend, if I'm right, at least 2 or 2.5% of their GDP for military defense. There was no European taking care of this agreement. This is what President Trump criticized. He was right, actually. Criticized a lot that Europeans have to do more about the military defense themselves in order to expect that this will be done always by the NATO, meaning by American money, right? In the end, this is what he meant, actually. America first. And as a matter of fact, the only country, and this is not a joke really, even during the crisis, the only country that spent most of the money for military defense was Greece, for understandable reasons, because of the so-called East danger, see Turkey. So the only country that spent more than 2% of the GDP of the state was Greece. Everybody else was spending less than 1%. Believe me, Germany was spending for years less than 1%. And this is why Mr. Trump specifically attacked Germany because of that, of violating this agreement. So this is the one thing. The other thing is, of course, military cooperation just started in a more intense way, so to say, after Britain left the EU. This is just a story of 1.5 years. Is a very late development. Yes, okay, this is now another question about securing the borders, because we have now, as you know, a crisis since now 2 weeks between Greece and Turkey at the border, at the land border. But let me please first close this. Well, as you know, military cooperation is something. Yes. There is a room for the redistribution, as I told you. There is a room for redistribution, but this room is very, very restricted. Okay, so Frontex, for example, for Frontex is anyway forcing some money in the budget, but if there's a crisis, by the way, not everything depends only on the EU. Also, the national states can, as fellow states, can react and support another state. Like Greece, for example, in this case, a lot of support came from the Baltic states, from Austria, from Germany, and so on and so forth. Okay, so both EU and national states can support another state. This is now an answer to the question by Maher. Now to close the discussion about military spending. Okay, no problem. The point is that military cooperation is still intergovernmental. Does not belong to the first pillar. It's not integration. Okay, we're not yet at the point in the EU that we construct or we start even to construct a common military policy. We are far away from that. Still far away from that. It is still intergovernmental policy. Is based on intergovernmental cooperation, and this starts again. And this cooperation started 1.5 years ago, as it was clear that Britain will leave the EU, and started in cooperation with Germany and France specifically. But we are far away from that. Okay, so this is what I had to say about this very important and interesting point: military spending. There was one more question about one more question by someone, not about the borders, it was something else. Anyway, yeah, what was the question? Fraud, yes, exactly, okay. Yes, there is a, perhaps you remember, there is in the EU, because we have to do with expenditures, with money to be spent, and this money is not always spent in the right way. We have been discussing a bit in the last project, in the last course. I always have projects in my mind. Anyway, in the last course, about a specific EU institution, which is the OLAF office. It's called OLAF. And this office, the task of this office is to monitor how money is spent in all countries. I mean, especially money coming from the structural funds. For example, to build a highway, to make a bridge, and so on and so forth, okay? To construct a new port on an island, whatever. Okay, they monitor how money is spent. They send even officers to all countries at the places that the money is invested or has to be spent, in order to make on the spot checks how the money is spent. Well, it is, as a matter of fact, this office secures that every year some billion of euros are paid back to the EU because of penalties states receive because of money being spent not properly. Fraud, simply fraud. Okay, this happens every year. Billions of euros are paid back by member states because of spending money not properly. Okay, I just an example that now I have in mind, just to provide you with an example, although we lose time. But anyway, these are also funny things, and not always, you know. We have also to discuss about some funny things that happened around. For example, during the crisis, there was an article in the Spiegel, which is the biggest German journal, and the title of the article was "The Silence of the Lambs." You remember "The Silence of the Lambs" was a movie, a very famous movie with this psycho guy. I don't remember the name of him, but you remember the movie perhaps. The Silence of the Lambs, and this was really about lambs on the island of Crete in Greece. Yes, thank you. It was on the island of Crete, okay, and this Olaf office sent officers on Crete to check how money is spent in agriculture. In this case, in keeping animals, especially lambs, which is the case on. They have some millions of, thousands of lambs on the island. So what they did, the guys there, I mean, not the officers, the shepherds actually, what they did was the following. They knew about the schedule of checks beforehand, and this was perhaps a mistake to inform them when the checks will be made, in which area, in which region of the island. So what they did was to gather all ships' lamps together in the night, and to bring all of them of the whole region, okay, not only of a village, but of the whole region, and to bring it from village to village, to which next day the officers will go to check. So instead of counting the officers, instead of counting, let's say, 1,000 in this village, in the specific village, 1,000 ships, they counted 20,000. And this happened night by night. They brought the ships by night to the next village or to the next region where these officers will make checks in order to, of course, to get higher subsidies for the animals. Okay, this is just an example, and this happens all over the EU by all kinds of projects financed and supported by the European Union. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say specifically about fraud. Thank you very much for the question, because you know fraud and corruption is something I'm very sensitive with, as you know from the last course, of course. So please, we still have some time. Let's spend 5-10 minutes, perhaps more, in order to finalize some things. Please go now to change to slide number 9. Slide number 9. There is an older slide here, but again, helpful to understand how money is spent, nevertheless. You can see on that slide, on that diagram, how money is spent. I mean, you know, you see the pink color is agriculture. Okay, now less. Okay, as I told you, only 43%. Not. It used to be in the 80s, 70%. In the 80s, money of the EU to 70% was spent for agriculture. But if you go now to slide number 10, then you have a better and updated, more or less updated diagram. For example, the 2015 EU budget, which is the annual budget, by the way, it made at the time approximately 1% of the gross national income. This annual budget for 2015. This is nothing. This is not much. This is you know, this is 1% of the EU's gross national income. Okay, of all money made in the EU, so to say, 1%. And you can see on the diagram then how money is spent. Again, 46% agriculture. But you know, agriculture also in terms, for example, smart, inclusive growth. Sustainable growth, natural resources. I mean, now projects in terms of green economy. Okay, green economy, to support the green economy. These kind of things. Not only agriculture in terms of producing potatoes, okay, but in general, in also regarding this kind of environment. Yeah, very important environment. Now 40%. You know, exact spending year by year is different. 2015 was 40. Next year, 16 could be 45. You know, and so on, so on and so forth. I mean, okay, but you cannot exceed the ceiling. The ceiling is given for 7 years. You cannot exceed the ceiling. You can spend from year to year more or less in these different sectors, but the ceiling is given. You cannot exceed it by borrowing money, for example. The EU cannot borrow money to spend more in 7 years. Okay, this is important to understand. Now, please let me see what follows after slide number. Okay, I would say we will now stop here because we are now on slide 11. Okay, we will stop here for today. We will have a longer class. I hope you enjoyed the class today. You have learned, hopefully, again, interesting things you didn't know. You have not been whereabout. So let's now stop the lesson here for today. And again, thank you very much. You know, short lessons with a lot with a lot of information, sometimes of hopefully fun information, pleasant information. You know, not only in Palestine, bad things happen, okay? Also in Europe, many times money is spent in the wrong way, okay? So if it is about money, you know, things can go wrong all over the world. I mean, this is a common, yes, attitude or a common thing. Well, so we will stop here. We will continue tomorrow. I hope that we can, or let's make the following appointment. We will stop tomorrow as soon as this presentation is completed, okay? This will take perhaps 1.5 hours or even 2 hours, if perhaps, I don't know. But I guess 1.5 hours approximately in order to close this presentation tomorrow and to have one more, I would say 1 hour, 1.5 hours at the most on Tuesday in order to close everything, okay? Good. So I will now close the, okay, thank you very much. I will now close the session in, let's say, 20 seconds and expect everybody tomorrow, 1 o'clock. So in order to have a bit more time, in order to close, I would say 2:30, 2:45 tomorrow afternoon, close the session. Okay, 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. tomorrow, we will start again a new session. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.